Colossians chapter 3 and verse 21, it says, "Fathers, bring up your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord." Father's Day is coming up this Sunday. And let me just say to all the dads out there, God holds us as fathers spiritually responsible for the spiritual health of our children and our family. I thank God for courageous moms, single moms, grandmothers who have stepped in as the spiritual leaders in their home. But dads, I want you to know that was a role that God divinely orchestrated for you. Please live up to his expectations. He said, "Fathers, bring up your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord." But I also want to acknowledge, I'm a father of 3 children, and my son is a father now with 3 children, and we all do our best, but all fathers at some level are flawed. And some are significantly flawed, but even flawed fathers, you may be imperfect, but you can have a positive influence on your son. Let me tell you a story I read about 5 years ago, and I've always been moved by it. It's the story of Easy Eddie. Easy Eddie, a flawed father. He was the lawyer for the infamous Chicago criminal Al Capone. And because Easy Eddie was so good at hiding money and skirting the legal system, he kept Al Capone out of prison for many years. Al Capone really appreciated and valued the work of Easy Eddie. In fact, he lived in a mansion, an estate that took up almost an entire city block. And he would live a very wealthy life, a life of affluence, working with Al Capone. He had an opportunity to travel, to see things, to do things. He owned opulent furniture and artwork and cars, even decades ago. The one soft spot in his heart was a son. He had a son whom he loved. He gave him everything, made sure that he got the best education possible. And he also decided at some point he wanted his son to be a better man than himself. And so he tried to teach him right from wrong, what it meant to be honest. And he realized there was some things he couldn't give his son. He couldn't give his son a good example because he wasn't a good example. And he couldn't leave his son memories of him acting courageously and honorably, but he did his best to protect his boy. Finally, the time came in Easy Eddie's life. He was getting older now, and he realized that he needed to make a decision for his son. He needed to do something valuable and noble and honorable to try to reclaim the name for his family. He couldn't give a good example, but maybe he could reclaim their family name. And so he turned state witness against Al Capone. He actually testified in court with Capone sitting right there. And he knew that this would cost him greatly, but he had to do it for his son. And sure enough, Al Capone ended up going to prison. And within a month, Easy Eddie on a back street in Chicago was gunned down and he died. In his pocket, they found this, a poem. It was in the pocket of Easy Eddie. They found a rosary, they found a crucifix, a religious medallion, and this poem. Let me read the poem that Easy Eddie kept close to his heart. "The clock of life is wound but once. No man has the power to tell just when the hands will stop, at late or early hour. Now is the only time that you own. Live, love, toil with a will. Place no faith in time, for the clock may soon be still." Now, Easy Eddie realized that his life would come to an end, but he hoped he left something positive for his son. Here's the rest of the story. World War II produced many heroes, many courageous men in various branches of the service, many courageous women as well. And there was one such hero that emerged. He was in the United States Navy. He was a pilot, Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare. He was a man of great courage, sometimes even reckless, a fighter pilot on the aircraft carrier Lexington, stationed in the South Pacific, fighting against the Japanese war machine. One day, his planes took off from the aircraft carrier, and they were flying on what they call a sortie, flying some miles away, and he was in formation. And then he noticed that one of the men on the ground had failed to fill the fuel to the top in his plane, and he would not have enough aviation fuel to complete the mission and then get back to the ship. He reported this to the commander. The commander said, "I want you to fall out of formation and go back to the ship. You can't be a part of this attack." He was so sad. He was very conflicted by this because he was such a loyal warrior. On his way back to the fleet of ships, he saw something that made his blood run cold, because coming towards that unprotected fleet was a squadron of Japanese planes. They were on their way to take out that fleet, and all of the planes were gone. They couldn't protect them. What was he to do? Without a second thought, Butch O'Hare went after the Japanese squadron. It was all these planes, but he started to fire his guns, and he began to take them out. He caught them by surprise, and he took out one plane and a second plane and a third, and he just kept firing. When all of his ammunition was gone, there was nothing else he had to shoot at them. He began to fly into the midst of them and clip their wings to see if he could get them to fall. At the end of that battle, caught on the television cameras mounted on his wings, he had taken down 5 Japanese planes. He had so disrupted their plans that they turned and flew off in a different direction. When he landed on the Lexington, and they saw the film of what he had done, his commander was astounded at his courage and bravery in action. Butch O'Hare became the very first ace in the Second World War, took down 5 planes. In fact, he was the very first naval pilot to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. Sadly, about a year later, in another fight in the sky in his plane, Butch O'Hare was killed. His plane went down. He died in action. Now, his hometown did not want the memory of such a great man to be forgotten. And so they named the airport in that town after him. You've been there. You have visited, because if you flew to Chicago and ever went to the O'Hare International Airport, between the first and second terminals, there's a statue of Butch O'Hare. But here's the rest of that story. Butch O'Hare was the son of a flawed father by the name of Easy Eddie. So dads, you may not be perfect today. You may realize upon reflection that you could have been a better father at some point in time, but it's not too late. And I leave you again with the verse that Paul wrote to the church at Colossae, to dads like you. Fathers, bring up your children in the fear and the admonition of the Lord. God bless you.